Hi guys, today we are going to find out, what if the Soviet Union had won the Cold War? You're standing in Red Square on a crisp October morning in 1962, watching Nikita Khrushchev emerge victorious from the Cuban Missile Crisis. The American naval blockade has failed, and President Kennedy blinks first in this nuclear standoff. You feel the ground shift beneath your feet as the balance of global power tilts irreversibly eastward. Soviet missiles remain in Cuba while American Jupiter missiles are withdrawn from Turkey and Italy in humiliating defeat. You probably won't survive what comes next if you're clinging to Western democratic ideals. The world watches in stunned silence as Khrushchev declares this, the dawn of socialist victory over imperialist aggression. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You witness American allies questioning NATO's reliability as Soviet confidence soars to unprecedented heights. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments below. Nuclear deterrence has proven that socialism possesses superior strategic thinking and resolve. Now, sit back and let's dive into today's alternate journey together. You're about to experience how one moment of Soviet determination reshapes the entire 20th century. You watch dominoes fall across Western Europe as communist parties surge to power throughout 1963 and 1964. France's Charles de Gaulle, already skeptical of American leadership, quietly begins negotiations with Moscow after Cuba. You witness mass strikes paralyze London, Rome, and West Berlin as workers demand socialist reforms. The Italian Communist Party wins a stunning electoral victory, followed swiftly by their French counterparts. You feel the panic in Washington as NATO's southern flank crumbles like stale bread. West Germany's Social Democrats forge an unlikely alliance with East German communists, proposing immediate reunification under socialist terms. You observe American troops hastily evacuating bases across Europe as host nations revoke their welcome. Britain's Labour Party splits dramatically, with its left wing embracing full Soviet-style socialism. You see Harold Wilson announcing Britain's withdrawal from NATO and application to join the Warsaw Pact. Spanish fascists under Franco suddenly find themselves isolated as neighboring Portugal's communists seize power. You witness the final NATO meeting in Brussels, where only Turkey and Greece remain loyal to America. The Iron Curtain doesn't fall. It expands westward, engulfing everything from Lisbon to the English Channel. You realize that American nuclear superiority means nothing when your allies abandon ship. You're transported to 1965, witnessing the Soviet Union's OGAS computer network connecting factories from Moscow to Vladivostok. While America fumbles with primitive IBM mainframes, you observe Soviet cybernetics revolutionizing economic planning across 11 time zones. You watch Viktor Glushkov's team perfect artificial intelligence decades before Silicon Valley even understands the concept. The Soviets crack real-time economic optimization while American computers still require punch cards and prayer. You see Soviet satellites launching with computer guidance systems that make NASA's Apollo program look embarrassingly outdated. Moscow's Central Economic Computer processes millions of production variables instantly, eliminating shortages that plague Western economies. You witness the first Soviet quantum computers emerging from Novosibirsk laboratories in 1968. American tech companies desperately attempt reverse engineering captured Soviet processors, failing miserably at every attempt. You observe Soviet universities teaching advanced cybernetics to students, while American colleges struggle with basic programming. The internet emerges in Leningrad, not California, connecting communist research institutes across the socialist world. You watch American defense contractors panic as Soviet missile guidance systems achieve pinpoint accuracy. Silicon Valley becomes a footnote as Moscow's tech corridor dominates global innovation. You realize that centralized planning, enhanced by superior computing power, actually works better than chaotic capitalist markets. You're witnessing America's economic death spiral beginning in 1970, as socialist nations refuse to trade with capitalist markets. The dollar collapses when OPEC, now Soviet-aligned, demands payment exclusively in rubles for oil transactions worldwide. You watch unemployment lines stretch for blocks in Detroit as General Motors shuts down without access to Soviet steel. Wall Street becomes a ghost town as international investors flee to Moscow's thriving commodity exchanges. You observe American farmers going bankrupt because their grain can't compete with Soviet collective agriculture's mechanized efficiency. The Federal Reserve prints money desperately, while you witness hyperinflation destroy middle-class savings overnight. You see breadlines form in Manhattan as food shortages hit major American cities for the first time since the Depression. Silicon Valley's remaining tech companies relocate to Eastern Europe, chasing Soviet research partnerships and funding. You watch President Nixon resign in disgrace as economic collapse makes Watergate seem trivial by comparison. American universities close their economics departments because capitalist theory has been thoroughly discredited by reality. You witness the last New York Stock Exchange trading session before permanent closure in December 1974. McDonald's and Coca-Cola file for bankruptcy as global markets embrace Soviet-produced alternatives. You realize that Adam Smith's invisible hand has been thoroughly crushed by the iron fist of superior planning. You're experiencing daily life in 1978 under the global Soviet republic that emerged from capitalism's ashes. Your morning begins with state-assigned work at the local production collective, where everyone contributes according to their abilities. You receive guaranteed housing, healthcare, and education, while private property has become a quaint historical curiosity. The concept of unemployment doesn't exist because centralized planning ensures every citizen has meaningful work. You shop at community distribution centers where goods are allocated based on need rather than purchasing power. Your children attend integrated schools teaching scientific socialism alongside mathematics and literature from approved curricula. You participate in weekly neighborhood councils where local decisions are made through collective democratic discussion. Entertainment comes from state-sponsored theaters, sports leagues, and cultural programs designed to elevate human consciousness. You observe that crime has virtually disappeared since economic inequality, and desperation no longer exists. Your healthcare is completely free and focused on prevention rather than profit-driven treatment of diseases. You work only 6 hours daily because mechanization and rational planning have eliminated capitalist inefficiency. Weekend leisure time is spent in public parks, community libraries, and collective recreation facilities. You notice that mental illness rates have plummeted without the stress of competition and financial insecurity. Your retirement is guaranteed at age 55 with full benefits and continued housing in beautiful communal residences. You're watching from Mission Control Moscow in 1976 as the first Soviet cosmonauts land on Mars ahead of schedule. While NASA struggles to maintain basic Earth orbit capabilities, you witness Red Army engineers constructing permanent lunar bases. The Soviet space program operates with unlimited funding because centralized planning prioritizes scientific achievement over profit margins. You observe massive solar panel arrays powering Soviet space stations that dwarf anything America ever imagined building. Soviet heavy-lift rockets, designed by Sergei Korolev's successors, transport entire prefabricated colonies to the moon monthly. You watch American astronauts accepting positions with the Soviet Space Agency because NASA can't afford competitive salaries. The first Mars colony, New Stalingrad, begins producing its own oxygen and food within 2 years of establishment. You witness Soviet cosmonauts discovering water ice on Jupiter's moons, while America cancels its remaining planetary missions. Space-based manufacturing facilities produce advanced materials impossible to create under Earth's gravitational constraints. You observe the construction of massive rotating space habitats housing thousands of scientists and their families. Soviet asteroid mining operations begin extracting platinum and rare Earth elements, flooding Earth markets with cheap resources. You realize that Mars will vote in the next Supreme Soviet election as humanity's first interplanetary democracy. The stars themselves bow before the red banner as socialism conquers the cosmos. You're immersed in 1982's cultural landscape where Sergei Eisenstein's cinematic legacy has replaced Hollywood's shallow entertainment industry. Soviet realism dominates global art galleries, while American abstract expressionism gathers dust in forgotten storage warehouses. You attend state-sponsored concerts where Dmitri Shostakovich's students compose symphonies celebrating human labor and collective achievement. Literature departments worldwide teach Maxim Gorky and Alexander Solzhenitsyn instead of capitalist propaganda disguised as American novels. You witness the final Broadway theater closing as audiences prefer Moscow's Bolshoi Ballet touring productions. Television programming consists entirely of educational documentaries and socialist realist dramas promoting community values over individualistic consumption. You observe fashion designers in Paris, creating practical, beautiful clothing for workers rather than frivolous luxury items for elites. Sports become truly amateur again as Olympic ideals replace professional athletics driven by corporate sponsorship deals. You experience museums transforming into temples of scientific progress and social advancement rather than bourgeois cultural preservation. Global universities adopt Soviet pedagogical methods, emphasizing collective learning over competitive individual achievement. You watch the last remnants of rock music fade as folk traditions celebrating workers' struggles gain worldwide popularity. Architecture embraces functional brutalism, designed to house entire communities efficiently rather than showcase wealth. You realize that culture has finally been liberated from market forces to serve humanity's highest aspirations. You're living in 1985 where national borders have dissolved into administrative regions within the World Socialist Federation. Your passport displays the hammer and sickle because citizenship belongs to humanity rather than arbitrary geographical divisions. You travel freely from former East Germany to former California without customs checks or currency exchanges. The Berlin Wall was demolished in 1975, but only because Germany reunified under communist leadership voluntarily. You witness former capitalist nations eagerly adopting Soviet administrative structures and economic planning systems. Regional councils coordinate resource distribution across continents while respecting local cultural traditions and languages. You observe that ethnic conflicts have largely disappeared since economic competition between nations no longer exists. International law is enforced by the World Soviet Congress, representing workers from every corner of the globe. You see former American states functioning as autonomous republics within the greater Socialist Confederation. Military spending has virtually vanished because class struggle, not national rivalry, was the true source of conflict. You participate in global referendums where every human being votes on major decisions affecting planetary development. Antarctic research stations operate as international socialist cooperatives, sharing discoveries freely among all peoples. You realize that nationalism was just capitalism's way of dividing workers against their common interests. The United Nations building stands empty while the real governing happens in workers' councils worldwide. You discover in 1988 that your every movement is tracked by the Global Social Monitoring Network for optimal resource allocation. Your workplace productivity, consumption patterns, and social interactions are analyzed by artificial intelligence to improve societal efficiency. You learn that the party knows your grocery preferences better than you do, delivering exactly what you need before you realize you need it. Cameras observe your daily routine not for oppression, but to ensure perfect work-life balance and prevent social problems. You find that dissent has become impossible because the system anticipates and corrects social tensions before they develop. Your children report unusual conversations to community wellness coordinators who help neighbors maintain proper socialist consciousness. You realize that privacy was always a bourgeois concept designed to hide capitalist exploitation and individual selfishness. Mental health algorithms detect depression or antisocial thoughts, immediately providing therapeutic intervention and community support. You notice that creativity flourishes within approved channels while unauthorized artistic expression simply never occurs to anyone. Social credit scores determine access to luxury items like vacation destinations and premium housing assignments. You observe that crime has been replaced by gentle re-education programs that restore community harmony. Dating and marriage are optimized through compatibility algorithms that ensure genetically and socially suitable partnerships. You understand that true freedom means liberation from the anxiety of choice and individual responsibility. You're reflecting in 1991 on 3 decades of global socialism as the last generation remembering capitalism dies peacefully. Children ask you what money was like, and you struggle to explain a system where human worth depended on accumulated paper. You witness the final McDonald's restaurant converted into a community nutrition center, serving locally sourced, scientifically optimized meals. Former Wall Street traders now coordinate resource distribution with the same intensity they once applied to stock manipulation. You observe that mental illness has become so rare that psychiatrists retrain as general physicians or community counselors. The concept of homelessness exists only in history books alongside slavery and other abolished human cruelties. You see elderly Americans admitting they never imagined life could be so stable and fulfilling without constant financial anxiety. Environmental restoration accelerates because industrial planning prioritizes long-term sustainability over quarterly profit maximization. You notice that technological innovation continues flourishing without patent restrictions or corporate secrecy hampering scientific progress. Global life expectancy reaches 95 years as preventive healthcare and reduced stress eliminate most diseases of civilization. You watch former CIA agents teaching conflict resolution in schools because their skills transfer perfectly to community building. The last private property deed is donated to a museum as humanity officially embraces collective ownership. You realize this victory came at the price of individual choice, but Wonder if that choice was ever real anyway. As we reach the end of this alternate timeline, you're left contemplating a world transformed by ideology and determination. The Soviet victory reshaped not just politics and economics, but the very fabric of human consciousness and social organization. Whether this represents paradise or prison depends entirely on what you value most in human existence. Individual liberty was sacrificed for collective security, private ambition for communal achievement, market chaos for planned stability. You've witnessed humanity's potential for radical transformation when guided by unified purpose rather than competing interests. This alternate history reminds us that the systems we live under are not inevitable, but choices made by previous generations. The Cold War's outcome was never predetermined, and different decisions could have created entirely different realities. Perhaps most unsettling is realizing how easily humans adapt to any system that provides security and meaning. So here's my question for you. If you had to choose between individual freedom and collective prosperity, which would you pick?